Drivers in Malaysia face one of the strangest interchanges in the world. The Penchala Interchange in Kuala Lumpur is an intricate maze of elevated roads and intersecting flyovers. It's an extraordinary feat of engineering. But what most people don't realise is that this incredible structure has been 20 years in the making, and it didn't happen by accident. Every flyover and ramp tells a story about how the city grew and adapted. In this video, I'm going to show you how this outrageous structure came to life, and then I'm going to show you how to recreate it inside Cities Skylines too. The story of this interchange is anything but normal. What started as a basic highway junction mutated into a spaghetti monster of ramps, overpasses, and desperate fixes. It's a story of what happens when the city grows faster than the infrastructure holding it together. Back in the late 20th century, the western suburbs of Kuala Lumpur were exploding. Entire neighbourhoods and business districts rose up almost overnight. But the road network was never designed for this scale of growth. The arterial roads simply couldn't cope. Congestion wasn't just inconvenient, it was paralysing. So the Malaysian government stepped in with the Western Kuala Lumpur Traffic Dispersal Scheme, an ambitious plan to pull traffic away from the city centre and relieve gridlock. On paper, it looked like salvation, but there was a problem. Development to the west was already outpacing the plan itself. The first big fix arrived in 2004, the Penchala link. A new Y-shaped interchange layered on top of the existing service interchange, and for a moment it felt like progress. But within a year, traffic volumes hit 111,000 cars per day. Kilometre-long tailbacks became a daily ritual, and the solution had instantly created its own problems. As development kept spreading, pressure mounted. The interchange connected highways, but local drivers were stranded. Access to the Penchala link was clumsy and inefficient. The answer? More lanes. A new phase of extra slip roads stitched onto the interchange to feed in local traffic. Functionally it helped, but visually it looked somewhat chaotic. At this point, the interchange looked less like a civil engineering project and more like something I threw together in Skylines at 3 AM, after a few beers. And yet, the puzzle wasn't complete. The final iteration came in 2022 with the Dash Highway, a 20-kilometre elevated expressway packed with 13 interchanges. Its eastern end terminated directly into Piccana, piling another layer of complexity onto the knot. Now, traffic heading east and north gets funneled through a dizzying array of overpasses and U-turns, but westbound traffic have it a little bit easier through direct turn ramps. It's both an engineering marvel and a monument to patchwork planning. Today, in 2025, the Penchala Interchange is no longer just a junction. Despite what you may think of it yourself, it's the beating heart of Western Kuala Lumpur's road network. But it's also a cautionary tale. When cities expand faster than their infrastructure, you don't get elegant solutions, you get chaos. Now obviously, this is going to be a challenge to build, but I think I have an interesting approach. As this structure has come to life through separate upgrade phases through the years, I reckon taking a chronological approach to my own build could be a unique and interesting way to do things. As I've shown you in the introduction, I have 3 distinct phases to work from, and although the data available is limited, I think I do have enough to go on. Now, one thing to note, the basic diamond interchange was built in 2001, but I'm going to leave that until the end of this section. First, I'm going to build the 3-way Penchala link. Work started on that in 2002 and it completed in 2004. Thankfully, it's not going to take me quite as long. I reckon I'll have this wrapped up in about 3 or 4 minutes. Now, although a Y interchange isn't really too complicated, for some reason I always struggle to make them. But frankly, that's not going to cut it on this interchange. If I don't have the base levels correct, then the rest of it is going to be an absolute mess. So although it's quite early in the interchange build, I do want to get the ramps just spot on. I want to have them nice and smooth. I want to get them connected into the highway properly as well, because frankly, once I start adding layers and levels, it's going to be really difficult to go back and maybe make amendments to these things. A lot of the roads are going to be super tight together, and that's definitely going to be something I need to look out for as the build progresses. Another potential pain point in this build is the local roads, and there's quite a few of them. Much like the previous point I made, it's going to be really difficult to try and amend these things later on. It's just such a tight build. I found it was really crucial on this build to have a map up on a second monitor at all times. It's too easy to get distracted, crack on building, and then you realise 10 minutes later, you've just built entirely the wrong thing. So now I think we can have a little look at the smoothness of these ramps and just check out how things look before we can move on and get traffic running. So I reckon as a starting point, that's looking not too bad. Obviously a little bit of work to be done, but things are looking pretty good. If any of you guys have watched my videos before, then you'll know that I normally start on the ground and work my way up. But this interchange is a little bit different. We do of course have an additional section underneath the main highway, but there's a good reason that I didn't start with that. Why interchanges, for me anyway, can be notoriously difficult to get right, and a really tough bit is getting the ramps in the correct locations. So what I decided to do in this one was to actually focus on getting those ramps first, and then I'll retrofit the diamond underneath it. Doing it that way means that I can get the positioning just exactly correct, and it will also give me a little bit of an opportunity to get it into a really tight space. Now you may have seen in the video earlier that the configuration for this tunnel is a little bit different than what I'm building here. This is how I believe the interchange was in its initial form. But of course it won't be its final form, we've got plenty more building to be done here. So let's get this bit finished off and then we'll move on and we'll get it reconfigured. One thing I couldn't tell from the historic photos was whether or not the contraflow design in the tunnel section was present or not in the initial construction phase in 2001. I would hazard a guess that it probably wasn't, and this is why I've kind of left it here to the end. This little section was actually really tricky to work out how to do it, and what I decided to do was to just draw a standard junction, stretch it out with move it, and then try and bring the additional roads, you know, the kind of crossroads in, and then remove the big one that we stretched the node out, and it actually worked pretty well. Once I did a bit of a rejig with move it on the individual roads coming in and coming out, I think we got a pretty decent result. You'll have taken the liberty to change it a little bit compared to what you'd see in real life. There's actually 4 lanes running under here on the real life one, but again, just to kind of keep things simple and doable, I decided just to use a single lane going each way, and I think that works pretty well. As we're getting ready for the next stage of the build, I've gone ahead and amended the local roads on the other side of the highway as well. The second phase will see the introduction of the ramps connecting neighbourhoods directly into the highway running east to west. For this build, it's not just a case of running ramps and connecting them randomly, I'll need to get the local ground level roads in place too. Now these roads are essential if I want a decent recreation of this neighbourhood. It can be difficult to gauge the positioning and the distances, especially as I don't use image overlay for these projects. So there will be a little bit of a trial and error, and there'll be a good number of redos as we go along. But to keep you guys sane and to keep you entertained, I'll be cutting a lot of that stuff out. As you'll see as we kind of build along, the challenging bit in this particular section is getting the ramps all at the right heights. In addition to that, we do have additional lanes that are added to that main highway that's running east to west, and they need to be added to the build too. The nice thing about this particular part of the build is it's just a case of just adding a few extra lanes to that particular highway and running the ramps off it. That will get a lot more complex as we move into phase 3 of the build, and where we actually have to create brand new highways to connect to the interchange. When I was researching the history of this interchange, I found a bit of conflicting information. Some sources state that this phase of the highway was always planned with the next phase in mind. The next phase, remember, will connect that big elevated highway directly into the interchange. However, that point of view doesn't seem to be shared universally, accusing the planners of really just focusing on local issues rather than the wider network. I suppose, like most things, the truth is probably found somewhere in between those 2 points of view. So as we wrap things up on this particular stage, this is the last ramp now, we can have a little look at things in motion. I have to say at this point, the way that it comes in and terminates into that neighbourhood, it's really what I had in mind for one of my other builds, and then I ended up just running it into big arterials, but I think it does look pretty good. It's quite dramatic, isn't it? The third and final phase will now see the connection of that dash highway. Remember, this 20km elevated highway runs in from the east and terminates directly into this interchange. This will require me to connect a significant number of ramps. It can be easy to become confused right now, so care will need to be taken to make sure all the connections are there and connected the right way. Any mistakes at this juncture can cost me quite a bit of time. Now, I wanted to shout out the person who suggested that I build this, but I just couldn't find a comment. I think they made the comment about, I don't know, probably about a year ago, something like that. And frankly, without going through every comment on every video, I was never going to find it. So if you are watching and you know who you are, thank you very much. This is a great suggestion, by the way. If any of you guys have suggestions as well, just drop them in the comments. I do read them all, might not necessarily be able to respond to them all, but they absolutely do all get read. For obvious reasons, I can't build everything that everybody suggests, but don't let that put you off. Chuck it up there anyway, nonetheless. Anything that's interesting and doable kind of goes in the list, and I think this one was kind of put on the list and it wasn't necessarily deemed doable, but I think a wee bit more confident in my ability now, and I thought, yeah, now's the time. This is an absolute banger suggestion. I appreciate all you guys getting involved in the community post. I haven't quite made my mind up exactly how I'm going to approach the next series that we start, but there are a few projects that I want to work on before we get cracking on in that, but I reckon we might not have too long. We'll maybe get it started in the next few weeks. Alright then, so back to the interchange itself. So obviously we're adding quite a bit of complexity here, but it's not going to be too complex to get the thing finished. So we'll stick to the plan, keep the map up, and we'll just take individual bits one at a time. The tough bit really in this section isn't necessarily the elevated roads, but rather it's the ones that are more at the ground level. These will require really tight side-by-side connections, and the issue or the challenge really is getting the terraforming done. But again, with the use of the road tools and making sure that we're using the key walls, we can kind of get around a lot of the problems and issues that this raises. Now, although I try and avoid using Move It too much when I'm doing the roads, again, I'd usually just prefer to actually just delete the section and rebuild it. You normally get a smoother connection. It is going to be unavoidable. It can introduce a certain amount of jank that really be very difficult to fix without just doing a rebuild. So you will see me using it here, but I am going to try and keep things to a minimum. What I really try and achieve here is to try and get some real nice smooth connections, really important for the overall look, and we want to have that polished, we want to have it looking sort of realistic and pretty much what you might see on real life roads. Now there is a big caveat to that, and that's going to be the big elevated section that is running from east to west. And you'll find that the actual main elevated section is really bendy. Now I can only imagine that the reason that it's been built like that is to perhaps try and keep the traffic speed down. Now I don't know for sure, I couldn't really find any information from it, but I can't really think of any other realistic reason why it was built like that. And that brings me on to the next point, and that is that I'm going to be building a U-turn here as well, and it's going to be an elevated U-turn. It's going to take traffic from the Dash Highway, and it's going to basically bring it onto the Penchala link and into the interchange itself. Now, although I found that when I was building it, I thought it was quite pronounced, it was really quite high compared to the rest of the build. It's actually not as pronounced as the real life one, but I did try and get things as close to real life as I could, but obviously I'm going to be taking some liberties here and there for the purposes of getting a video out, and two, getting an actual build done. So feel free to compare things yourself, and then you can kind of judge how I've done. So what I'll do is I'll pop on a time lapse for a minute or two, and then we'll try and get the neighbourhoods built. So the approach that I decided to take for building out these neighbourhoods was to do a mix of functional and non-functional buildings. The functional buildings are going to give us traffic to our local roads, and I think that's really important when we get the interchange built and really see how things move. And on the other end of the equation, the non-functional buildings, well, I'm able to place them just exactly where I want. So in terms of the aesthetics, it's an awful lot easier to place them where I need to place them without worrying about roads. In addition to that, having a bit of a mix of functional and non-functional means that the traffic can be at least at a reasonable level. These are all really high density buildings and they will generate an awful lot of traffic. So if I used functional buildings on every single plot, I would have some serious traffic issues. And in fact, I had quite a number of traffic issues as it was. I spent quite a bit of time trying to clear up these arterial roads. The map that I've used today is the Interchange test map. If you're not familiar with it, it's essentially just a big junction with 4 banks of traffic spawners. You can see that at the top right hand corner. These will send traffic in from every direction, and what I've done in the past was that when I needed additional directions, a 5th or a 6th or a 7th road, I would just be able to kind of copy and paste the banks. But of course, copy and paste mod does not work just now, and then what I would do instead would be to just create a neighborhood and then use traffic spawners to get traffic running there. But the traffic spawners aren't working for me. That didn't work in this map, and they didn't work the last time I've used them either. So I don't know what's going on with that, if they're just broken or if it's something wrong with my game. But given what I've just told you there, that's why it's crucially important to actually have some functional buildings in this build and get things moving, because otherwise the Sims wouldn't have any reason really to use any of these local roads. I guess I'm taking something of a reverse approach to making this particular build. Rather than picking a map and building around the mountains, I'm going to create the mountains myself, and I'm going to have them nice and tight, right up against the development and right up against the highways. Again, I'll use a little bit of creative license. It's not exactly what you find in this corner of Malaysia, but I think as a general overview, it's not a million miles away. I've used some really basic terraforming stuff, just used the height differences, and then I'm going to cover it with a thick, lush layer of vegetation. I've used the tree brush at 300% to get that nice and thick, and then what I've done is I went back into the tree brush and removed some of the trees. Now the reason why I'm removing some of the trees is just to generate some shadows. That'll give us a little bit of depth, and when we get on to making some of the cinematics and some of the screenshots and all the rest of it, it's going to look a little bit better and a little bit less uniform as well. For the buildings that I've used, a lot of it really is from the China pack. I think the vast majority of it is, and then what I've done is taken a selection from other packs, ones that take up a bit of a footprint, something that takes up quite a bit of space, and I think it will work quite well with the rest of the buildings once we have them in. Now I do always try and make a point at some stage in the video just to say thank you very much if you've made it this far. As always, huge thank you to our channel members and our Patreon members. If you want to check out any of the benefits of membership, check out the links in the channel description. Now that you know what goes into creating a complex Asian interchange, I can tell you that they can look a lot more detailed than this one. Check out this video where I break down what it took to make the most detailed interchange I've ever made.